Thank you for staying with us. It's still a beautiful, beautiful Wednesday morning right here on your favorite breakfast show, Wake Up Nigeria. And right now, it's time for a nutrition conversation. I have with me returning Dr. Jesupelumi Adenihun, popularly known as Dr. JP. Now, she is a visionary leader in clinical practice, nutrition, health management, and health technology. She co-founded Checker, a trailblazing health technology company, revolutionizing access to rapid and high-quality diagnosis services. Now, she's here today to talk about nutritional needs across the lifespan, right? Yeah. Talking about whether and if our diet should change as we get older. Welcome back to Wake Up Nigeria.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure having you here. Yeah. Okay, so I was asking, in this part of the world,
yeah,
can we really see our diet change? Aside the obvious, okay, of course, from infants, from the birthing, from a child, from a baby, you stop having milk and then you start having solids, and then, do you understand? But does it really change? So let's talk about that first before we get into the break.
All right, then. Good morning again. All right, thank you for having me back. So I would say that the diet changes in terms of the portion and maybe in terms of what the individual needs per time. Because, you know, it's not done in isolation. So most times when you're considering what kind of meals a person should have, you're considering their personal health risks. You're also looking at what they need for that period of time, like as their activity level increased or has it reduced. So for children, you know, they're in their high level period, like they're very high in energy and all of that.
True.
Compared to someone who is older, who is now beginning to, you know, become more sedentary, or even their metabolism has grown slower. So the kind of meals that they would have, even though it would consider or consist of similar things, but then it now differs in the portion, or it depends on the lifestyle or even the health risk or diseases that they now have. Yeah, so it varies.
It actually varies. Oh, all right. But I mean, as much as I think the reality is it should vary. But in practicality, it's vary. Do you understand? Because I'm thinking, you know, sometimes a lot of people talk about how sometimes your body craves what it needs. So first of all, before we move forward, is that actually true?
So when you're talking about craving, you know, we're all a product of influence. So sometimes we crave things just because if I tell you to pick up your phone and then you see a food blogger, you know, the person is serving amala and then they're putting lots of, you know, beef and all of that in it. There's something that starts to happen in your tummy, like, especially if you like that particular meal, right? You start to maybe say, I should have this. But that was influenced by what you just saw, not exactly by you saying you have the craving. So a lot of times cravings are influenced, but it also boils down to you saying, okay, for some people, you may want to identify what the trigger for that, you know, that craving may be. Yeah, so your body would not always crave what it needs in that sense, right? But the body also knows what it needs.
It knows what
So when you start to feed the body what it doesn't need, the body gives you signs, right? So there are people that start to feel heavy after eating certain meals. And that's because they've already probably eaten a very large quantity, a very large portion of what they shouldn't have. And then there are always acute, you know, outcomes or things that have just happened over time, chronically. And that's why we just, you know, like what we're doing now, educating people and letting people know that, okay, so as you progress through life, there are actually things that you should start to consider. So that's why you're working with your family physician, you're working with your nutritionist, and you're saying, okay, where am I now at this point? What are the things that I need to know? And then what are the things that I really need to start consuming for my own lifestyle and this phase of life that I'm in?
Because I mean, looking at the social media space as you've actually rightly used, there's a lot of information flying around, right? Some people talk about how, if you feed your body sugars, it continues to crave sugars. But some people talk about how, if you're craving sugar, your body's probably telling you to eat something that probably might be sugary, but maybe something higher in fiber or something in that light.
So let's look at it like this, right? You know, I already mentioned that the body also knows what it needs. So if you're fatigued, you've gone an all day or you've gone for an extended period and you've not had anything, your body begins to give you signs. So there are symptoms that we call it like in medicine, right? And then some people, you just notice that they start to get really sweaty or they're shaking. Those are signs, right? You need to feed your body at that point in time. But now let's go back to that thing of having sugar and then craving more sugar.
Yes.
So we've talked about different lifespans, or we're talking about different lifespans. If you have a child is just being exposed to particular foods.
Yes.
And I'd also just use this to point out to the importance of women having the right education early on, because they literally shape the first few years of a child's life. Especially, it doesn't even happen when a child is born. It happens from, the pregnancy period, because whatever she eats is also affecting the child at that point in time. So if you give birth to a baby and the baby is only been exposed to, breast milk, the baby doesn't know what sugar is until you introduce sugar to the baby. So up until that point, the baby is fine with their breast milk. And even by the time you start to introduce the complementary foods and say maybe you're giving pap or you're giving their, mashed beans or mashed yam, they're fine with it until you start to show them
there's something else.
Yes, so that's when they now start to, crave more of it. So you have the responsibility of shaping, in some sense, the taste bud of that child and even what they can crave. So it's not to say they shouldn't have things that are sweet, but there are innovative ways around it. So I've had mothers tell me, they tell me that, okay, instead of adding, sugar cubes to the food of their babies, so what they do is they mash bananas. Sometimes they do apples, right? And those are, there are sweet options that you can consider. So.
Okay, amazing. So now let's quickly just talk about the lifespans now, probably different age groups. Are there certain nutritional foods we should be going to at certain stages of our lives? Let's talk about, we've spoken briefly about, I think everybody knows that, okay, if as a child, from a child, probably introduce them to vegetables, fruits, and all of that to grow and all that calcium. Now let's talk about teenage age. Let's talk about early 20s, later 20s, 30s, and all that.
Yeah, just briefly, you have the mom feeding well, and then she has a baby, because some babies have diabetes even right from or they're having high levels of sugar when you give birth to them. And then you have the babies, of course, on the milk. Then they go on to start being introduced to the family meals. And then you now have the younger ones or the teenagers, like you said. So for them at that point in time, because that's the peak level of puberty, or the peak level of saying they're high in activity, in physical activity, or requiring lots of energy because of all of the activities that they're involved in. So you want them to have highly nutrient-dense foods, or foods that would supply them with numerous amounts of energy, right? So even as they're having their proteins, they're having the fiber foods, or they're having their vegetables, they're also having, carbohydrates in adequate quantity for them to match up with what it is that they're expending. Then you now proceed to adulthood. So now with adulthood, it's becoming trickier because we're getting more sedentary. So initially what we would have seen maybe when we were growing up was, okay, maybe some people will sit down with really large portions, but you really don't need that, except you're about to go on a marathon, right?
I'd like for you to go on, but now I'll actually have to cut you here because we have to go. We'll actually continue the last bit of that probably next week. Are you here next week?